What are the things that you will not compromise on? And have you ever let desire and fear come in the way of those values? King Arthur and his Knights at the Round Table has spurned countless versions and adaptations in books, films, and other media over the centuries. And today, we are exploring the A24 film, The Green Knight, and what this story has to say to us about the path of honor and how we are tested in life in navigating the tension between overcoming fear and desire so that we can live in courage and bravery. Welcome to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, where we analyze stories and films that help us make sense of life. We are four friends with backgrounds in storytelling, filmmaking, teaching, and narrative therapy. Join us on our quest towards telling and living our stories more meaningfully. I'm Derek Hatch.
My name is Nick Natal.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joseph Wilson.
I'm Jason Lynn.
All right, so we are at our retreat, and it is Nick's pick tonight.
12:45.
I was really about to sell the time.
12:46.
I hate this podcast. I have the energy. I don't know where y'all are.
I almost fell asleep during the movie, but I said, no, we will not be falling asleep. And we will be lively and we will be present.
I'm getting there.
I'm getting there too.
We'll get there,
I'm not
We'll
asleep,
get there.
but we're okay.
You almost had me in the second half.
Not gonna lie.
I am getting delusional though because it is 12 a.m. So this may be a really
almost
fun
1.
one.
Yeah, this is the latest I think we've ever done a podcast on here. If you guys haven't been keeping up with this series,
It may get unhinged.
it might get unhinged because normally when we do these episodes, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of notes and things that we've done, but
Not me. Very rarely.
I had notes on the Wally episode.
But you see now we're all like you because we are watching these films for the first time as each of us are choosing a film that the others haven't seen. We're just going for it.
Yeah.
And so tonight Nick picked The Green Knight,
which we finished 5 minutes
which
ago.
we just finished, and you are getting our raw reaction to it through this conversation. And so Nick, I'd love to know, why'd you pick The Green Knight?
Why'd you pick this movie?
It's not bad as for viewer discretion. It is really actually good. It has a Macbeth vibe to it. If for those who know that story.
All right, here we go. Let's do a quick letterbox description for The Green Knight. When honor was everything. An epic fantasy adventure based on the timeless Arthurian legend, The Green Knight tells the story of Sir Gawain, King Arthur's reckless and headstrong nephew, who embarks on a daring quest to confront the Green Knight, a gigantic emerald-skinned stranger and tester of men.
But Nick, why did you pick it?
First, let's hear the reactions.
You want reactions first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bet.
That's
We'll
like
do
a
that.
blind
All
reaction.
right, let's
It's
go
like,
around.
Who's chomping at the bit?
You.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you
Go.
first.
I'm not.
You're first.
I'm chomping
I'm
at the bit to figure this out, how I feel about
I'm
this.
chomping at the bit to hear it from you.
Yeah.
I was
Uncomfortable, it looked like.
not uncomfortable, just like I was trying to follow along and understand what is going on, because I'm thinking this is linear and then it's not, and then maybe it is, and it just goes back and forth and all over the place, and I'm like, oh well, he needs that, oh never mind, it's here, but what happened to whatever, we keep going on this journey, and I'm trying to make sense of what the point is. First of all, beautiful movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a lot to the film.
I agree.
And a lot that speaks to my life personally, and that's the major reason I wanted to bring it in.
I think that's what fascinates me so much about you picking this movie is I'm like, there's a point here that you chose, and I want to know what it is. I'm very curious. I'm very interested. Sir Gawain, I've got mixed feelings about that dude.
What do you think?
I think that's
Explain
the
it.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
explain it.
yeah.
What do you
Like
think?
it's interesting because you're saying he has virtue, and it's almost going out of its way to show this guy having like very little virtue. He has in some ways, but like he succumbs to fear. He succumbs to lust, to desire, to passion of the moment. He gets assailed by these thieves on the road, and it's just him sauntering through in the dark and just trying to make it. I guess it's maybe him finding and understanding and defining honor in his life. I don't know. I'm still trying to track and figure this movie out.
Yeah,
almost
it's gonna
an
come-
hour
This is
past
a challenging film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to have an instant reaction is very difficult.
After
Yeah.
an entire day has come and went. Oh, the fox was cool, by the way. I like the fox.
The
Fox
fox
was
scene is
good.
my favorite scene where the fox is warning
Gawain.
Sir Gawain.
Gawain.
I'll probably remember it now with Gawain. But Sir Gawain with literally it's just a warning. There's only death on the other side. It felt like the Odyssey, just this epic hero's journey as this character is going through. I feel like I kind of interpret it as these things that he is struggling with it in his head. There may be some witchcraft and stuff at play inside of the movie for certain scenes, but I feel like a lot of it is in his head as he's going through this journey, as mental things are becoming physical in his eyes, and he's having to see that. And to piggyback what you're saying, Jason, about Gawain being virtuous, and you're saying that you're trying to see that, but he stumbled and he fell for lust, he did this. But I also thought so do we. And because of Christ, we're still virtuous in the Lord's eyes. And I guess spoiler, at the end of this movie, this character, it doesn't show it on screen, but it is implied that this character does die. But he has to accept his death, which is a dying to oneself. And I feel like that connects to the Christ-like story.
And Pinocchio. Yeah, last episode.
You got to die to yourself to really embrace the Christ and full virtue of it. And that's kind of what I got as we're talking about it and as we're kind of thinking right now.
No, it's a great companion piece. And so...
Hold on. No, actually, I got to get this out.
Okay.
This dude gets a challenge from this knight, and the king goes, "Are you sure? You understand this challenge?" He goes, Yeah, I understand it. And then completely hacks the dude's head off like he didn't just hear what he said. I was like, huh? You could have just scratched him on the arm
Literally.
and would have been repaid the same.
Yeah.
But he lopped it off. And maybe I need to know the context of the original story because I don't have that. With the Pinocchio movie, I had that because I've seen Pinocchio.
For sure.
This is completely out in left field.
Yeah.
I had to brush up on this tale because it had been a while.
What do you mean? You knew this was coming, Derek?
I did.
Oh my gosh, you
two-
guys were both in cahoots.
You guys were in cahoots.
So
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So what
that's
happened?
Cheating.
What happened was
You didn't watch it though.
I didn't watch it. No,
Still
and
cheating.
he didn't watch mine
But
either.
you read it. You read the story. You
No. Here's where this is amazing, Jason. This retreat, we've had all these amazing conversations, and all these amazing things have lined up, right?
Yeah.
So Nick told me a couple weeks ago, he's like, I'm thinking about doing this, but I might want to do this. And I didn't know where he was going to land. I'm reading this book, The Power of Myth. Nick is reading it as well. And I get to a page and I said, oh my gosh, Nick, the Green Knight is in the book. Joseph Campbell is dissecting and analyzing the story of the Green Knight. And I took the snapshots of the pages and I started just forwarding this to him. And it was just so interesting timing wise how he was thinking about doing this story. And then I was reading about it here. And then on top of that, we were also talking about adaptation because both this and Pinocchio are different kinds of adaptations of their source material. They take a lot of liberties with them. But there's something at the heart of it that they're pulling out from those stories that even in a different form in these films, it still comes through. And so we've been talking about that letter versus the spirit adaptation. And we've talked about what makes a good adaptation. And so I didn't know with the Green Knight what changes were going to happen. And I was really trying to keep my eye out for that. And for the most part, it's actually more faithful than I thought it was going to be to the story.
Okay.
I think for me, this clicks pretty quickly. I think I've got a handle on it. I might be off, but I do think that what I took away from this is this idea of honor. He wants to go, like Jason said, he wants to go on this quest, but Gawain is imperfect. He hasn't been tested yet. He wants to be a knight, but he hasn't been properly initiated. So he gets to sit at King Arthur's side, and he gets to be invited. It's like the call to adventure. He's inviting him into this.
There's a really great scene.
Yeah.
Where he says, look out and look at all these knights, and he sees songs.
Yes.
And he sees songs that like the muses of the world could never tell or sing.
Yeah.
And then he asks Gawain, oh, like, who are you? It's my mistake that you were not brought up and poured into. And I would like to know who you are. And what he does is he say, tell me a story.
Yes.
To show me who you are. And that is awesome.
Yeah.
That might be my favorite little moment.
And
in
then
this film.
Gawain says, "What? I have no story to tell."
Yeah. And then is it the queen who says,
"But we have all these legends here, so do not take yourself
sit by them idly."
Yeah.
well, but then she also says, but you don't have one to tell
Yet.
Yet.
Yeah.
And I love that because he wants the narrative. He wants the story. So I think there's that admission of like, I don't have it yet.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's what King Arthur was trying to draw out. And so when the Green Knight does come into the room in that Christmas celebration, there is that opening of the eyes for him of like, oh, this could be my story. Like this could be how I achieve that honor, how I begin to live into the narrative of knighthood. But
and what does he do? He just jumps right in, sloppily.
It's like
he has
Zuko.
no idea.
Sloppy. It's like what?
This is Zuko. This is Zuko in book 1, where he's sloppily going after the Avatar, and then afterwards, when he truly understands what honor is, he actually is redeemed in a sense, and he understands himself and who he actually is. This is Zuko.
Yeah, well, because you try to plunge into a story when you're not fully ready for it yet, because he's trying to have the glory and the honor, but he hasn't been properly tested.
Yeah.
And that's what the Green Knight, I think, is trying to bring out, is he's trying to bring that test forward. But of course, you're right. It's just sloppy. Like he takes his entire head off. And the scene when the Green Knight takes his head and just walks is awesome.
And he's just laughing, maniacal laughing.
Sometimes you have a visual of how these things go in your head, but you watch a movie and you're like, dang, that's even better than what I had in my head. That's awesome.
There's the book that me and Derek are reading is called The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, and it's like a foundational book right now. And there's a lot that I wanted to share on this film, but in that part of the film in particular, where he just jumps up and grabs a sword, you could say it's representative of his lack of character, him not thinking it through. In the original poem, he's actually has given advice to do that because they think that it's going to kill the Green Knight and he won't have to finish the game. And so he does it, and then the Green Knight picks his head up, and everyone's in horror. And he's like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Okay.
So it's pretty cool. But this quick paragraph in the book, he says, Paul has written in Scripture, for God has co-signed all men to be disobedient, that he may show his mercy to all. And it says, you cannot be so disobedient that God's mercy will not be able to follow you, so give him a chance. And then it says, in quotes, sin bravely, as Luther said, and see how much of God's mercy you can evoke. The great sinner is the great awakener of God to compassion. That's not a license to do what you want, but what Gawain did was he was brave.
Yeah.
And he screwed up, but he was brave, and it started his journey. And because he was brave, he was able to build a story that could be told.
Yeah. Jason, you sat up when he was like,
because it's not a light.
I know it's not being literal when it says go and sin boldly. It's,
That's so awesome, though, because sometimes in life, you just have to go for the story, even if it doesn't work out. This is my 3rd year having a business with all things narrative. And there's a part of me that's like, man, should I have waited 2 years, 3 years? Should I have given myself more time before plunging into this adventure? But there's a reality, because I look back and I'm like, man, that was sloppy. That was sloppy. Man, what could I be further along if I had waited? And I think if you live your life like that, you're never going to take chances. Because there is no quote unquote right time.
I think the greatest advice I was ever given is that the enemy operates in the what ifs. You will be stuck in what ifs. That's all you constantly think about. What if I did this? What if I did that? That will get you nowhere.
Yeah, there comes a moment when you just have to say yes to life. You have to say yes to the adventure. You have to say, yes, I know there's a story out there I want. And it's awesome because I haven't read the full like King Arthur like mythology, but I wonder, again, if I haven't read it, but I wonder if in these stories, Sir Gawain is just kind of in the background. If he's just like this character who has all these amazing things are happening. He's stagnant. Nothing's happening. And then you get to this moment where he's like, it's my turn now. This is my story that's going to get told. And it's a story that I think of all the King Arthurs, I think it's one of the most like long lasting ones that we talk about a lot because it is a little unorthodox compared to some of these other stories, but I think there's really something rich here. And I think despite the fact that this movie may not lean into maybe as many of the Christian elements or it's purposefully trying to bury them,
right,
or even the fact that it's just taking like creative liberties, I think there's something of such high value here that is very true to the story itself. From what I can tell. Again, I just finished watching it 20 minutes ago. But yeah, Nick, what are some things that you want to walk us through, like about the movie, Power of Myth, how it connects to your life? Where do you want to go from here?
This idea of myth in culture, and if that story is taken out of culture, Joseph Campbell has this phrase that he says that you're only left with the New York Times. You're only left with what's in the newspaper. And it's mostly these very difficult stories. And a lot of the times I come on this podcast and I bring in these very difficult stories. So I have, Stranger Than Paradise, which is not so difficult. It's charming and it's fun, but there's definitely a weight
and a realness
Stranger
to
Than
it.
Paradise. Inside Llewyn Davis, Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
After Sun.
Yeah. These are stories.
Past Lives.
Yeah, Past Lives. These are stories that I have definitely lived, and they're more like the New York Times. But when you enter and bring into the myth that you have this knight, Sir Gawain, on an adventure, these stories now can come under the umbrella of the Green Knight myth. And the Green Knight is now a figure in my life, or a knight. The knight figure is a figure in my life that I'm really attracted to. And I think I've been attracted to it subconsciously for a long time. I think I like the values of self-control, of loyalty, of courage. I can get in a single focus and just do something for somebody, whether it's defend or whatever. The ministry that I was in is very knight-like. Some people could look at themselves like a superhero coming in to save the day. It could be also a knight on a horse coming in to protect.
Well, I think I recall you once saying that you're finding that the knight language and mythos and story is more resonant with you than like the superhero. Because the knight is a prototype to that. But there's something about it. And it's no coincidence also that you've said that, I don't know if it was jokingly or seriously, but like Batman Returns might be your favorite movie. And I was like, The Dark Knight. And then you kind of had this moment where it was like, of course. So
if you put this, as I look at it in my life, I'm sent out, and then in Gawain's trials, he faces the scavengers, he faces the spirit, he faces the temptation.
Yeah.
I faced the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah. I faced Inside Llewyn Davis. I faced After Sun. Those were my journey to knighthood. Yeah. And now it falls under and is transformed as the knight myth is illuminated for me. And I can see that story and enter into it. And now it's not just the New York Times anymore. Yeah. Now it's like a much larger purpose that I can enter into. And I just really like that. There's many things that is mentioned. And I was talking to Jason and Derek about this before. He has a story in the book where he says that he's a child up until 5 years old. They wear shorts, and at 5 years old, they wear pants for the first time, and it's a signifier of manhood. Even at 5, it's a ritual of manhood. So these things are training the mind
into manhood
in society. Without them, he argues that, these gangs form because they're creating their own myths outside of society. These own initiating acts, the graffiti, they're myths that are outside of society. Society's no longer serving them. And they've rebelled. And so I look at Gawain, and he's an adult. The movie opens with him in a brothel on Christmas morning. And he's saying, hey, get to church. And he's like, I'm not ready. I have time. I have time, he says in the beginning. I have time. And he's not ready. He has no story to tell. He's in a society where, I don't know what their society was. They did have myth, but...
Yeah. Well, it's just the whole medieval society in general.
Right.
I mean, the storytelling is...
The storytelling, is literally ingrained into their whole culture.
Yeah.
Do you see what you're wearing, Joseph?
I'm wearing a knight.
Oh my gosh!
The knight is green and yellow.
Oh my
That's
gosh!
actually pretty
This
funny.
is awesome.
Look at that.
All this time we've been sitting here, staring at each other, and Jason just recognized there was a green knight on Joseph and did not know this movie was coming.
In context, he literally just put his finger on my shirt and just kept pointing.
I just put my hand on Joe's chest.
And I'm like, "What are you doing, bro?"
This is awesome. Mm-hmm. This is awesome.
Hey, they say nothing good happens after midnight.
It's late. It just helped me get back.
So, like,
help me get back
medieval times,
their culture,
the myth culture.
The Green Knight helps put all these other obstacles that you've faced into a story of being a knight and going on that journey.
Yeah, so everything that I've experienced, I was entering into a story I didn't know I was entering into. And I entered into that story the same way Gawain entered into that circle to fight that knight. It was not
headstrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When would you say you entered into that?
So Stranger Than Paradise, that aimless, like, longing, things are just like dreary and you're not figuring it out wherever you go, is everything up until discipleship. And when I decided to say yes to discipleship with Christ, then I'm thrusted onto this journey.
That was you cutting off the knight's head.
Yes, I think so. And then I now am out into a land that, in a world that is way weirder and harder than I ever really knew.
And to be honest, more spiritually and grounded too.
Because you're seeing that perspective.
There are people on the ground dying as Gawain sees the guys with the arrows dead against the trees. There are like, it's funny because they're not creatures, there's not monsters. This is a fantasy, but it's I think still reflective that the world is really, really a mysterious place, and it's mentioned in it multiple times.
Yeah.
And so you navigate that, and you fail over and over and over.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've failed in the same way that Gawain has failed. He's giving to get. He's barely giving enough. He fails in kindness.
Yeah.
He asks, what am I going to get out of this? He falls to temptation.
Yeah.
He's fighting it. If it's like as natural and as human as a story that I can see, maybe it's because it's very similar to my story. And all the while, the root of the story is this idea of, I guess, self-preservation, but dying and letting go.
Yeah.
And Gawain is still holding on
Had to get it in.
because it is so good. That's why it is so good.
Hey, what's the color that's in the background of that scene? It's red, right? With Kylo Ren and Rey, and it burns down
into orange colors. Like
well, it's black, but it goes to black as it's burning down. And in this movie, it's red going to green. And if I could remember that whole speech that the one lady said, or the lady, how did it
the speech about the green.
I be your lady.
But what her speech about
No, you're right. The speech about the green.
got a lot of green, but red. Red was lust, passion.
Oh, yes. And green is what comes after lust, right? Doesn't she say something like that?
Yeah, in the heart.
And the beginning of the movie was a really cool scene where it's Gawain and he's in his throne and he's got this big red background and red light around him, and his head just catches on fire. And he's just sitting there burning. And then we go further into this movie, and at the end, he's, I guess, visualizing his life after this. If he had run away, and in the end, it fades to green. And he gets his head cut off all the same. Yeah. As if he had just gotten it.
But we don't know 100% for sure. Yeah. It seems a little ambiguous. But
the fact that it's this passion and lust and desire giving way to a slow, creeping eventual death, decay. Like the green, no matter what happens, the green is going to cover everything.
We will always go back to
always go back to that.
Yeah.
So one of the major themes that the director likes to play with in his other movies, and what he's trying to show, is this idea of time. And this idea of time that's like impinging on us. Like you cannot escape it. Time's gonna win.
Yeah.
And you're going to die. One of the really cool scenes in the movie, when Gawain is tied up, the director actually gives you a minute to rest. So we were talking about that in Transformers. The movie stops for us to contemplate how time is working against us. And so he's sitting there and the camera pans, and it pans as the seasons change all the way around to Gawain's death.
Yeah.
And then it reverses and the seasons change again back to him being alive and fighting against it.
Oh, it's awesome.
But it stops for all the audience to now question and contemplate themselves what time is doing to them.
Yes.
What time that's
so good.
It's awesome.
Yeah. After the knight tells him to return in a year, he goes on this quest to be able to go find that knight at the chapel.
Well, even before that, before his quest, he's indulging on his own myth. Because at that time,
yes. Thank you for
with
bringing
his
that
year,
up.
it's like he does nothing.
He does nothing with the time that he has. I think that's what you're going
He just
to.
kind of basks in the knight myth. Like he gets his portrait painted. He has the puppet show is awesome because it shows that there's a myth being formed
About
but it's a myth that's doomed to fail in a sense because the puppet show ends with him being beheaded. And so I love that because that's a great point. He's just basking in.
I think that goes what you're talking about with time. The time
Escaped him.
and then at the end when the knight's like, you had a year to prepare yourself.
Yes, to find the courage. Yeah,
he's like, well, even if I had 100 years, I wouldn't be able to find the courage. And then I think that's when it goes into his subconscious of what if he ran away.
yeah.
And go ahead.
So when he finally gets ready for that to meet that fate, and he goes and stays in the house of this hunter and his wife, and he stays in there. This is some of my favorite stuff of both the movie and the story. So the hunter says, well, I will go and I will hunt something and I'll bring it back for you. Anything that you receive in this house, return to me. Now, in the original story, it's, I think, kisses, right? So every time the wife tries to seduce him in the story, there's like a kiss that she gives him, and he gives the kiss back to him. And this happens, I think, like 2 or 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah.
He goes and kills a deer, which symbolizes something, and then he goes and he gets one kiss, and the wife is seducing him, and he's resisting it. No, and they get a kiss, and he gives it to
he returns
the
it back.
Yeah.
Then he kills a boar, and the wife seduces him again in an even more aggressive way, symbolizing the power of the boar, and he resists it. Then he kills the fox, and the wife comes on him with the sash, the green sash, the deception. And he falls to that. And he keeps that. He does not give it.
Yes,
to
he keeps
the king.
he keeps the sash, and in the movie that's depicted as well, where she's seducing him and offering him the sash. There's the really gross image of what's in his hand, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, though, not to get too graphic, but like the idea of your seed spilling, like
You're wasting your seed in this.
yes, exactly. Like there's actually a lot of
Isn't that a scripture? Not letting your seed fall on like the dirt or something like that. I think that's a scripture.
But there,
somewhere.
yes, and there is overall just a really ancient idea of like the preciousness of that and not letting that waste. And essentially, there's like a waste that's happening because, well, one, that encounter didn't result in anything. Like nothing came of it. He just got this sash. Now, of course, he goes and meets the hunter in the forest, and the hunter says, "Do you have something for me? You have something you'd like to give me?" And he says, "No."
Yeah.
He doesn't give it to him, right? Again, this is a game. We have to keep in mind that this is all a game. And he says no, and then that's when he doesn't get the fox. He lets the fox back into nature. He doesn't get that thing which he had hunted for him. And he lets it go, and then he bids him farewell, and he says, like, don't come back. Like, if you come back around, we won't be here.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it was made clear in the movie, but in the story, the hunter and the Green Knight are the same character. Yeah. Did you guys pick up on that at all?
When he was kind of talking about like the games and stuff like that, and just his demeanor, I'm like, okay, this is kind of like this feels somewhat similar.
Yeah.
for the Green Knight.
Well, and,
Not at all. Didn't even.
okay. Yeah. So they are supposed to
I
be.
thought he was talking about his mom. Because I've got questions about that. What the heck?
I have a question about the
in
mom,
the
too.
story, the mom conjured the knight.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
mom set up the story for Gawain, and she turned the king of the castle and transformed him, and they're all behind it.
Which I think is fascinating. That's a fascinating
The king-
symbolic
the
image
hunter,
too of
you
the
mean,
mom
yeah, as a
creating
kid.
a story
Yeah.
for him to live in,
Yeah, and
but
go ahead.
almost prematurely. Like he's not ready,
not ready
for
for
it.
it, yeah.
So that's a whole layer of meaning there too.
But she doesn't want him to have his head cut off. She wants him to.
She
Where the-
probably...
In the story at the end, the Green Knight just nicks him on the neck. And he says, I'm doing this because you did not give me the satchel. You did not give me that green belt. And Gawain returns home with that scar.
Well, basically, it's that sign of humility. Like he had been humbled, because in the movie, I love when she says she gets the satchel, but then she says, "You're not." Doesn't she say like you're not
You're no knight.
You're no knight.
you're no knight? Yeah, which is like ouch.
Yeah, it's like,
because
dang. And then hold this in your hand with your hand.
hold your seed in your hand.
this-
I think for
Yeah.
me, I think that scene was unnecessary, and I think he did it because it wasn't very clear, maybe that they were even having sex in the scene.
I mean, it just kind of seemed like they're intense. You can kind of pick, even if they didn't show that, you can
Yeah.
kind of tell that that's what was going on. But
Yeah, it was.
I think that's an A24
That's
touch.
yes. There's little things that like it's not a perfect movie, but if you get underneath the stuff, it's all there.
So in the book, there's this sense of he's been humbled. Like he's learned that his story is not finished. His quest is not finished, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these King Arthur stories and just myth in general, there's a sense of like finality to it. Yeah. But there's a sense that his story is just getting going, and his first attempt at it was not a complete success, but there's a mercy that was shown to him to where you can try again. Now, this movie, I feel like maybe it took a different approach, because as he's like about to get that cut, whatever that is, whether it's a little nick or his full head cut off, we get this huge montage, like really long montage of what happens if he runs away.
Yeah.
And in other words, he fails to get back up again. He lived, and
He stays in self-preservation.
Yes.
He chooses to hold on to his life.
which is symbolized by the green satchel that he's wearing.
That he never takes off.
Never.
Yeah.
That thing's probably
but
funky.
But I love. This is
We all have
this is
that we don't
this
take off.
Yeah.
This is so good, guys. When people are put in positions of power and they are not ready for it, like leadership. Think about this today in our culture. How many people are pushed into leadership and they are not ready to be there?
Yeah.
They have not matured, right? And the way that it shows that he has no handle on this, like he gets this, what is she, like a prostitute in the brothel, like gets her pregnant, then has to marry like into
Royalty,
like
yeah.
royalty, and then they have a son, loses the son, his kingdom is
There's-
attacked,
there's-
and the walls literally turn that rotting
The light itself.
green.
Yeah.
You see that the green, like he can't escape the Green Knight. He can't escape that effect of the green.
He can't escape time.
And he
Yeah.
can't escape time, exactly, because green is a color that can go either way. It can either be a color of beauty and nature and bringing the earth to fertility and life, or it could be something that's like gangrene, like a flesh wound, like something that's rotting and decaying, and you have to scrape it out. And so just that whole montage, and then of course, like you're losing the head. Because, I mean, you got to talk about, when you're talking about beheading, the head is the place of knowledge, of what controls the body. And when you cut off the head, You know what I'm trying to say here, right? Like when you cut off the head, like you've got a body, but you've got no brain controlling that body. So literally like his kingdom, like the mind and the heart, like it's all separated and the kingdom falls apart. And that's the vision of what happens if he can't grow, if he runs away. And this fear and desire, like the Power of Myth book talks about how in a lot of these cultures in history, fear and desire are like the two things that are standing at what would you call it, Nick? Like they're basically like standing in the way of us entering into that story of eternity, that story of life. I mean, you kind of know what I'm talking about, but it literally like the desire and the fear, that those are the things that are his downfall if he cannot get them right. And that is just such a universal thing for all of us. We all have fears that we need to deal with, and we all have desires that if, you know, I don't think desire is a bad thing, but there are desires that if they go unchecked, they will lead to our ruin.
Yeah.
I have like probably a final thing to say. I don't know if we're there yet, but
I mean, I've pretty much said everything I want to say. Like, what, Joe, Jason, what about you guys?
I want to connect this to Pinocchio too, because there are a lot of different things.
People made of wood.
Well, that, but just
your head's chopped off. Pinocchio has to live his life. He has to figure out all those coming of age obstacles as a boy. Gawain's figuring it out as a man, as a young adult or a young man.
Yeah.
And I just personally resonate with that it's happening a little bit later in my life. But this idea of the last shot where it snaps back from the montage and you see his eyes and he says, wait, now I'm ready.
Yeah.
And he finally discovers that conviction and he lets go of life. He lets go of his self-preservation and he finds authenticity right there.
Yeah.
And if he runs away and holds that sash and does not let anybody take it off, like his new wife tries to take, he's still living inauthentically.
Yes.
And everything around him crumbles and people throw crap at him from the...
The story he's telling everyone and coming back to is inauthentic. He's told them a lie and he's living a lie.
Yeah.
It's better. Yeah. It's better, like if he actually does get his head chopped off at the end, it's better that he dies
with honor.
With that honor and with his values intact, laying the satchel down and not giving into fear, rather than him living and just being honestly a shell of a man.
Yeah.
Like that was what I took away.
That's as universal as it gets.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta be honest, that montage really bothered me as I was watching. Like, I did not like it because I hate when movies do that, where it's just long periods of time where people don't say anything. Like, his son dies, he doesn't say, I hate that because that's not realistic. Like, that's not life. Like, we overreact in life often, like with our words. We talk too much when we're stressed and all that. But then it caught on to me. Like, I finally figured out what he's doing. And I'm like, oh, I see what's happening. This is a man who is no longer human.
Yeah.
He is a silhouette of a human. And that's why he can't emotionally react, right? Like, he's not engaged. He's disconnected. And I was like, okay, fine. I was like, okay, movie.
His eyes are dead.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, movie, you did that. I'll give you credit for that because that worked really, really well in conveying that.
I think this movie really shows, like, whatever your values are, to stick to those values, even if they are hard or even if they're going to lead you to a place where you are uncomfortable or you may die. You know, there are a lot of Christians out there that have to deal with that, you know, in states where they can't worship freely. There's a sense of, are you going to stand on that value in the moment that it matters? Or are you going to let all of that go away just because of the fear that you may have?
Yeah.
There's two moments I want to just bring up, and then this one final thing.
Yeah, go for it.
But the one moment, I texted Derek because I just cried during this moment. He comes in after he's in the fight from the bar, and he's got mud all over his face. And his uncle in the story, but it's very very father-like. It's very, very much, to me, a representative of God in us. And he says to Gawain, you know, Gawain is avoiding this trial or this game, this journey. and he basically says, "You're really going to hold me to this." And King Arthur says, "Is it wrong for me to want greatness for you?"
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Gawain says, "I fear I'm not meant for greatness." And that his reply is he looks at Gawain and he gets up and he wipes his face clean.
Yeah.
He says, "You have mud on your face."
Yeah.
And he wipes him clean. Like that
Yeah.
is just so powerful.
Yes.
To watch.
Yeah.
Like that is God right there. At the end where he's about to get his head cut off and the Green Knight says, "Sir, you flinch."
Yeah.
He goes, "Did I show such fear?" But I just read in the book yesterday, it's talking about one of the highest levels of maturity is not to flinch in the face of death because you're not afraid of it. And he even mentions and I'm not sure where this is, Derek, you mentioned it. He says in the Acts of John, it's not in John's gospel, but it's one of the, what would you call it?
Like Gnostic or Apocrypha Gospels.
That Jesus actually has a song and dance with the disciples before he goes out into the garden, and they sing together.
That is in the Bible. They sang a hymn. I think it's in.
Jesus does
might be in John.
not flinch in the face of death. He celebrates and welcomes it.
Yeah.
And he looks at Gawain and says, "You flinch." Because Gawain is still not there. He's still not there. And then at the end, he does not flinch. He's as strong as can be because he's not holding on. He's not holding on anymore.
Yeah.
And that's just awesome. That is amazing.
That is.
That is an amazing story. And that's a story that I just love it. And I can look at that story and we were talking before, these myths can erase guilt. And I don't have the guilt and the shame of maybe these failures because now I see this myth that the world enters into and not just me.
Yeah.
That this is far bigger than me and I can look at that with pride.
Yeah.
And I did go through these trials and I did face all these things and I did let go of that green belt. And I look at the camera now like Gawain looked at that camera.
Yeah.
And I can stand on that. But what's also interesting is there's another conversation we has with the hunter, and he's like, "What are you doing this for?" And Gawain's like, "Honor." And he's like, "You're asking me?" And Gawain doesn't know. Gawain does not. Society is pushing something on him.
Yeah.
He's got to figure all of this out for himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what it's going to look like, what he's going to turn into.
Yeah.
Nothing. And the guy just calls him out. He goes, "You have no idea what you're talking about, do you?"
You're not good with questions.
Yeah, and Gawain's not because he's for the first time entering into original experience. And I want to read this real quick. It's an excerpt from the book. The book is very question and answer. It's not really like a narrative.
Yeah, it's an interview.
Yeah, it's an
Really?
interview.
Okay.
And so the one question in the interview says, why is a myth different from a dream? And this is about a page I'm going to read, so it's a little lengthy, but it's awesome. So you're going to enjoy it. Why is a myth different than from a dream? And he says, because a dream is a personal experience of that deep, dark ground that is the support of our conscious lives. And a myth is the society's dream. The myth is the public dream, and the dream is the private myth. If your private myth, your dream, happens to coincide with the society, you're in good accord. If it isn't, you've got an adventure in the dark forest ahead of you. He says, if you're forced to live in a system that is against your private myth, you'll become a neurotic. The next guy says, but aren't many visionaries and even leaders and heroes close to the edge of neuroticism? And he answers, yes, they are. And he says, how do you explain that? And this is the paragraph. He says, they moved out of the society that would have protected them and into the dark forest, into the world of fire, of original experience. Original experience has not been interpreted for you, and so you've got to work out your life for yourself. Either you can take it or you can't. You don't have to go far off the interpretive path to find yourself in very difficult situations. The courage to face the trials and to bring a whole new body of possibilities into the field of interpretive experience for other people to experience, that is the hero's deed. And so Gawain's on a journey to experience things for himself.
Yeah.
Not for what his mother's trying to do for him.
Yeah.
Not for what King Arthur says, look at all these knights. He is on his own into the world of fire.
Yeah.
And he takes it. Gawain takes it.
Yeah.
Gawain becomes an aspirational character, especially in this film. And that's the twist that Lowry puts on the film. And whether they wanted to take Christian elements out or not, or whether the knight literally says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Like,
literally.
it's just awesome. It's awesome. And then I think he didn't know where to go, and he just said, off with your head as a joke. A little bit like Inside Llewyn Davis, where he gets punched at the end, like that last bit of black comedy.
Yeah.
And I think that's all it is. But that is something. This is a foundational film for me. This is a culmination of a lot of things for me. And now I'm out into the original experience of a new forest. And it's not necessarily a forest, or maybe it is, and I'm just more equipped.
Yeah.
And I'm experiencing things without the green belt on any longer, because we joke about what a wonderful day. But in the book, again, there's a story about the Indian war cry. When they went into war, the Braves would ride into war and they would say, what a wonderful day to die, because they did not hold on to life.
Yeah.
Because they knew that this was not the end. And in order to get to the next step, you had to die. And Gawain dies. He made the decision to die, and I love this movie. I think that's awesome.
Good. That's good. Yeah, that's good.
All right.
Today's a good day to die, boys.
That's it. We're good.
That was mic drop.
Well said, Nick. And thank you for bringing this movie to us. Thank you for having us stay up late, turn out all the lights, and just get soaked in this myth. That's where we're all on. We're looking for that next step. And if you are ready to take that next step in your story, then visit us at allthingsnarrative.com. We also offer workshops, educational workshops, where we talk about like Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. We talk about myth and all these concepts here. We offer education that helps you learn the art of storytelling and be able to see these things more clearly. And so if that's something you're interested in, reach out to me in the show notes here. And I'd love to be able to set up a workshop for you and your group. And we will be back next week for another retreat pick. So until next time, take care.
Which is in 6 hours.
Bet. Thank you for listening to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, produced by All Things Narrative. If you'd like to learn more about our coaching, workshops, events, please check out allthingsnarrative.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at All Things Narrative. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and tune in next time as we continue exploring the stories we love and the stories we live. Take care.